Living out on the east coast of the country as a kid, it was always tough trying to convince my parents to stay up late and to be able to watch the West Coast football games that would come on Saturday nights. So that meant missing out on many USC games during their peak. But one man made it must-see TV. No matter how long I had to stay up late, I was watching this man play. Colt Brennan was the epitome of what the 2007 college football season was. Weird yet exciting, fun yet unpredictable. Hawaii was as big as a nobody team as, dare I say, a UMass or a UConn, basement dweller. But in 2007, Colt Brennan single-handedly brought them to their first FBS bowl in school history. People constantly man, there's people that just always poo-poo on this guy. Well, at least they did. Honestly, he had a tough go at things, and honestly, the people that did criticize Brennan disrespected what this man did for college football. Well, sadly, we have lost Colt due to an apparent drug overdose of the deadly drug fentanyl. Colt's death touched many around the college football world, including Hawaii-bred QBs Tua Tagovailoa and Marcus Mariota. It was definitely sad to see one of my favorite childhood players die at such a young age, but today we'll cover his life, from high school all the way up until he tragically lost his life. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. If you like listening to sports stories and hearing the latest hot takes I have on sports, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and smash that notification bell. I am not someone that likes rushing out videos like some YouTubers do, but I like to deep dive into the players and the subjects that I'm covering, rather than just giving you, the video version of a Wikipedia page. Colt's early years were a bit foggy. There isn't one point that you can really laser into as to why he started abusing drugs and alcohol, but I'll add more context to that later on. He attended the famed Modern Day High School, which has produced countless of pros and has been viewed as quarterback U on the high school level, as both Matt Leinart, Matt Barkley, and JT Daniels have all played at the school. It seems like Colt didn't really, play much there, as there's no mention to any of his stats or, any photos of him in any of the searches that I've done of him in high school. Based on that information alone, he either wasn't that good or he got stuck behind a better quarterback, as this is modern day after all. And he did, he was the backup to Matt Leinart. Colt then decided to take a postgraduate year and play at a private boarding school in Massachusetts, which seemed like to gain more interest from D1 schools, and he ended up actually walking on to the University of Colorado's football team. And now this is where Colt's first incident took place. In 2004, Colt Brennan entered a dorm room of a female CU student, uninvited, and according to the victim, exposed himself. You know how this goes. He says he denies this. She says he came up and did it. Brennan, who according to his report was intoxicated at the time, was arrested and eventually convicted of the charges of felony burglary and trespassing. So in 1 week in jail along with probation until he graduated from college. But a guilty verdict for unlawful sexual conduct was vacated by the court due to lack of evidence. So this was really the first incident in Colt's long lines of run-ins with the law that you would kind of see a trend of, later on in his life, but not really so much in Hawaii. This is something that seems to be a thing with college football players, not to say it's a culture thing, but look at places like Baylor or Penn State, and you'll kind of see where I'm coming from. When you're around young kids and testosterone and stuff, it can, bring out the best in people or the worst in people. But anyways, the school obviously let him go as the Buffs were undergoing a bunch of other investigations, including wild sex parties and crime involving other athletes. So, they had their own problems, so they kind of just, didn't want any more issues or dramas going on. Colt denied all the charges, and this led him to have them take a lie detector test, which he passed and used to convince the school president at Saddleback College, a JUCO, where he was accepted at and was able to repair his image, and through the course of the time led his team to a conference championship, being named a JUCO All-American. He had a full scholarship to Syracuse and San Jose State, but June Jones, the coach of Hawaii, somehow, someway convinced him to walk on, and Colt took him up on his offer. And this would arguably be one of the best decisions of Colt Brennan's life, as June Jones was the right coach for Colt as he turned Hawaii from a nobody program to the most potent passing offense, since Timmy Chang was there.
Interest in him backed away. But not Hawaii, where Coach June Jones was satisfied with his personal background check of Brennan.
Everybody said he's the greatest kid, he's a winner, and everybody had positive things to say about him.
Jones invited Brennan to walk on with the Warriors.
I remember saying to him that, let me just say this, you can go to those other schools and you might get drafted in the late rounds. If you come here, I think you'll be the first quarterback taken. And if you don't have the courage to walk on, then you're not the guy I thought you were.
Wow, what a bold statement there from Jones. He really believed in Colt and challenged him, and boy, was Colt up to that task. Colt came to campus and instantly became the starting quarterback right out the gate. He started 10 out of the 12 games that season, and the only games he didn't start was against USC and San Diego State. He instantly started to break records as soon as he got on the field. Colt tied or broke 11 offensive school records, and what was also a very successful season for the team as a whole. He led the country in total offensive yards and touchdowns thrown. His 4,301 passing yards that season was the 8th most in Western Athletic Conference history. Against New Mexico State, he recorded career-high numbers in passing yards, touchdowns, and pass completions. He also had 9 300-plus yard performances on the season, including 4 400-yard games and a 515-yard performance. He was on the cover of ESPN, and the hype was very, very real for this guy, as he seemingly came out of nowhere and really came with a lot of baggage coming from a situation in Colorado where he was arrested and accused of sexually harassing another female student. But this guy wasn't finished yet. He was just getting ready to set the college football world on fire. In the 2006 season is where Colt really put his name on the map as one of the best QBs to ever do it in the college ranks. Brennan entered the year on multiple award watch lists, and rightfully so. Brennan passed for 53 touchdowns that season. 53! And he was only 1 touchdown pass short of the NCAA single season record. But in the bowl game, he ended up breaking this. The Rainbow Warriors, which, by the way, has one of the sickest team nicknames in all of college sports, finished the year with a 11-3 record, right behind Boise State, who was having their own historical season that year. Brennan finished 6th in the Heisman Trophy voting, right behind Troy Smith, Darren McFadden, Brady Quinn, Steve Slayton, and Mike Hart. Brennan passed for over 5,549 yards, 58 touchdowns, both of which were school records, and had the highest passer efficiency rating in the nation. The hype was now officially real for Colt. I know I said that in his first season, but after this season, scouts were clamoring at this guy, and there was just attention coming from, all the big time media outlets. And because of this, Colt definitely had enough acclaim to, finally achieve his dream to reach the NFL. And June Jones even told Colt this after talking to league personnel about where he may land. But after June Jones said he would land somewhere in the second round, Colt came back anyway for his senior year, as he felt like he had unfinished business at the school. And there was big talk that Hawaii would finally achieve their first and only undefeated season. Well, hindsight is definitely 20/20. His decision to come back could be one or two things. One, it definitely made his name that much more well-known amongst, the casual football fan. But two, it also definitely hurt his draft stock come later on, and you'll see exactly why I'm saying this. 2007 college football season was as crazy as it gets. The AP polls were up and down all season long, and the number 2 team seemingly always lost every other week, so it was a wild season. It was so weird, in fact, that Kansas, yes, that's right, Kansas, not basketball Kansas, but Kansas football. Kansas was the only team in the Power 5 to only have 1 loss to their record. Wow, think about that, Kansas. Crazy. This was the perfect season for a team like Hawaii to shake things up and shock the college football world. If you followed college football back then you know this was really the era where Boise State's brand as a football school was becoming established. And Boise State has been dominating the WAC conference ever since they stepped foot into the league in 2001. But Hawaii and Colt Brennan had different plans. In the last matchup of the year, which was a highly anticipated top 25 affair, the Broncos faced Hawaii, with the Warriors knocking them off for the first time ever since the Broncos joined the WAC conference. In this game, Colt, he just simply went off. Colt went 4 for 53 for 495 yards, 5 touchdowns, and 2 interceptions. The loss also ended the Broncos' conference winning streak at 17 straight conference titles. With a 12-0 season and the first undefeated regular season in school history, and claimed only their third ever WAC championship in 2007. The way the regular season turned out, Hawaii all but locked up their spot at a BCS Bowl. They were selected to play in the 2008 Sugar Bowl. But this is where the story kind of gets interesting. They were matched up against SEC football factory, the Georgia Bulldogs. And it went exactly how you think it would. Dogs only rushed 3 guys while having everyone else drop in the coverage. They were able to pressure him all game long despite only 3 guys rushing all game. They were able to get Colt early and often, and the pass game was just really non-existent. Hawaii ended up getting blitzed in a 41-10 loss, with a lot of their points coming later in the fourth quarter. At the end of the season, he was invited to participate in the 2008 Senior Bowl, where he didn't put on a great showing after he suffered a torn labrum in his right hip during the first day of practice, which he had an issue with during his days in Hawaii, but he still managed to play in the game, although not well. Despite this, Colt had a great year ending the year as a Heisman finalist, but the game against Georgia really hurt his draft stock as he fell way down the draft to the 6th round with the 186th overall pick to the Washington Redskins. He actually shocked many fans as he performed very well in the preseason in his debut versus the Indianapolis Colts, completing 9 out of 10 passes for 123 yards and 2 touchdowns. His success continued 2 weeks later against New York Jets when he completed 4 out of 5 passes for 79 yards and threw the game-winning touchdown on a 33-yard pass to wide receiver Jason Good. Brennan led all 2008 NFL rookies in touchdown passes, passing yards, and quarterback rating throughout the preseason. Well, despite his great performance, he never really saw the field that season. Next season, he got in place on injury reserve after tearing his hamstring and yet suffered another hip injury. The Washington football team were still committed to their first-round QB, Jason Campbell, who they just had drafted a few years earlier. So it's fair to say Colt never really had a shot to begin with in Washington. Colt was then cut after Washington had traded for another quarterback. After his stint with the Washington football team, Colt bounced around a few teams. First with the Raiders, where he was cut in less than a month. And between this time, however, is where we can finally point to the moment in Colt's life, which may have been the difference in him still being here today. After his Raiders stint, on November 19, 2010, Colt was back in Hawaii driving with his girlfriend and others before colliding with another vehicle on the highway. The accident caused him traumatic brain injury, broken ribs, a broken collarbone, and at one point he was even in a coma. According to his family, this accident affected him emotionally in the following years, and even Colt agreed himself. All I know is I woke up 6-7 days later, and I was, and still am, a different person. I suffered my TBI. I still have a small scar, on my brain, but it's an area that makes me impulsive and emotional. I've had to learn how to control that. Well, Colt got back on his feet, and in 2011, after he was recovering and everything, he went ahead and signed with the Hartford Colonels of the UFL, but again, never got the chance to play, and the league folded operations of the team, and Colt wasn't even picked in the dispersal draft. So his next most viable option seemed like that CFL. Well, that's exactly what Colt did. On February 28th of 2012, Brennan signed with Saskatchewan Roughriders. The announcement was widely reported online and attracted widespread attention in its aftermath. Although he was expected to be the backup, the Roughriders actually went ahead and later signed former NFL journeyman JT O'Sullivan, pushing Brennan down the depth chart and leading them to releasing Brennan in June 11th of 2012. And in between this time period, between him signing with the CFL and his next football opportunity, he got into more trouble. Brennan was arrested in July 25th of 2012 in Honolulu County on suspicion of driving under the influence and third-degree promotion of a dangerous drug. His blood alcohol level at the time was 0.17%, more than twice the legal limit for driving a vehicle. And next day he was released without any charges placed on him, so Colt definitely caught a break. It's not to assume, but maybe it's safe to say Colt may have called in a favor or two from someone important in the state, because I mean, this man was revered in Hawaii during his peak. Despite entering a non-guilty plea in November of 2012, Brennan pleaded guilty to driving under the influence of alcohol and had to pay a $300 fine. At this point in his life, Colt seemed to be running out of options until later on in 2013, where he found his next and what would be his final opportunity to play football with the Los Angeles Kiss. And yes, they are a team that was owned and named by the famous rock band Kiss and its two most famous members, Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons. But after Colt signed with the team, they found out he had another traumatic brain injury resulting from his accident back in 2010 and decided to cut him in March of 2014. And this was all documented on a reality show called Fourth and Loud on AMC. His time with the AFL, though short-lived, would be his last time as a professional football player. In 2015, Brennan would face even more legal trouble as he allegedly filed a false police report that his vehicle was stolen, something his attorney blamed on memory problems stemming from his 2010 car crash injuries. Charges were later dropped for this case. But to be honest, it sounds like Colt could have been suffering from the disease known as CTE. There's a lot of things to point to it. His erratic behavior in the last years of his life are signs of this. His constant run-ins with the law, his traumatic brain injury related to his accident, and also his years from playing football definitely didn't help. And it definitely could be something that his parents could look into if they do decide to have his brain looked at. Brennan had some stints in coaching. He started off as an assistant coach for Mauna Loa High School in Hawaii as a QB's coach. He wasn't really in the public eye during this time, as I couldn't really find much else on Colt, but it seemed like he was still trying to get back by volunteering and coaching various youth organizations and football teams. Even though this was a good and constructive thing for Brennan to do, he still had run-ins with the law. On December 10th of 2019, Brennan was arrested once again for operating a vehicle under the influence in a small town on the Hawaiian Islands. Again, Colt was arrested in August of just this past year for trespassing and refusing to leave a hotel while heavily intoxicated. He was charged with second-degree trespassing. Bail was set at $250, but he remained in jail until his hearing several days later. The judge granted his lawyer's request for court-supervised release without bail until his next scheduled court appearance later that month. It kind of surprised me how this guy, did a lot for the state of Hawaii and the big school there, but it seems like no one was really helping him besides his parents. They were just really excusing all of his mishaps and run-ins with the law. So I think there was some dereliction of duty by the state of Hawaii and the police departments there. If I were to be a betting man, the pandemic and quarantine probably had a really, really negative effect on Colt, as he was already dealing with emotional and mental issues as a result from his accident in 2010 and trying to make himself a functional person in society. So I would say, like most of us, it probably wasn't a good time for Colt especially. So I know it wasn't a good time for me and most people that had to go through that. It definitely wasn't a good thing for Colt to be going through, to be quarantined or limited in certain ways from his normal routine. And in between this time, he was actually going in rehab and his parents were helping him out. His dad said he was in the rehab facility where he was actually doing well at one point, and he was actually going to check himself back in, but in May of this year, he was found unconscious in his hotel room. It was said he had ingested the deadly drug fentanyl, which was apparently given to him by someone that he knew in a pill form. It could have been a different drug, it could have been Xanax or whatever. That was the result of his death. He was hospitalized in Newport Beach, California, and died the following day at age 37. Again, like I reiterated before, Brennan had attempted to enter a detox center hours before ingesting fentanyl, but was turned away because there were no open beds available. So wow, you're telling me that this man, his life could have been saved if there was open beds? That's absolutely crazy. It's sad to see how this man's life turned out. He had all the potential in the world to be a solid football player as well as a solid human being. And it was all lost. Just like that. In football, it's just as important to get drafted to the right team, just as it is to focus on your skills as a player. Because if you end up in the wrong situation, you could end up losing your career like a Josh Allen ended up in maybe like 4 or 5 years out of the draft. So it's very important to be drafted to the right team and have the right people in place to help you succeed. Also, if the injuries and car crash didn't happen, he possibly could have found a passion in coaching, as his name alone would have afforded him multiple opportunities on the Hawaiian Islands or elsewhere. But all in all, my condolences go out to the Brennan family. I know it's really, really tough time for them. I was just really happy to cover this guy and be able to watch this man during his peak at Hawaii, and I will always remember him as one of the best college football players to ever do it. I know this is a sad story today, guys, but if you like this kind of content, or if you liked any of my other videos that you watched in the past, make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, and comment down below to ask me who I should cover next, and what I could do better to improve myself. And until next time, guys, one.